On today's episode of the Steele Creek Explorer, a riddle. How far can you walk into the woods? I'll let you ponder that for a few minutes. Well, welcome back. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. So anybody who's done any hiking on the trails here at Steele Creek Park, or if you've talked to the naturalists here in the Nature Center, you might have heard talk of Jackson's Camp. We even have on our trail map this area that's located, and it's called Jackson's Camp. So what in the world even is Jackson's Camp? Well, we have to go back to the early days of the park. Before there was a nature center here that you would recognize, there were two naturalists that deserve special mention. These were two gentlemen that were the first naturalists hired by the city of Bristol, Tennessee, to conduct a natural history inventory in Steele Creek Park. The first was Brent Rowell in 1970, and the park that he explored was much smaller than the park we know today. In fact, the largest chunk of Steele Creek Park is in what we call Slagle Hollow. And Slagle Hollow had not been deeded over to the city of Bristol, Tennessee in that summer of 1970. By the next summer, however, in 1971, Joseph Jackson was the second naturalist that was hired by the city after that newly acquired Slagle Hollow area was added. And he spent a summer documenting wildlife in Steele Creek Park, and that was now much larger. And so during his stay, he actually spent a few weeks camping out into what today we know as Jackson's Camp. It is one of the most remote areas of Steele Creek Park. And so that's why it bears his name even today. And so I'm so happy to have the original document that he wrote at the end of his summer in 1971. And so let's go directly to his words and see what he had to say about the place we're going to today. Well, here in the Nature Center's library, we curate something that is indeed precious to us here. And this right here is one of two original copies from Joseph Jackson's 1971 document, where he documents the species that he found in Steele Creek Park. So you can actually read this. This is available online. We'll give you the web address on where you can find it. So I'm going to be very careful because, of course, this is the original document and it is starting to show its age. But let's go directly to the words of Mr. Jackson. So he tells us of some of the previous work that was done by his predecessor the previous year. That was Brent Rowell, as I mentioned. But Joe Jackson tells us that development of the Slagle Hollow area for use as an environmental study area is most promising. He says the area provides a diversity that would be advantageous to this type of study. If properly managed, the area could be used to illustrate many types of succession and habitats which occur in this area. Certainly, such a place is an asset to the city of Bristol and the surrounding area. Well, of course, I agree, but let's embark on one of the most ambitious journeys we've ever taken on Steele Creek Explorer. Let's travel several miles and take you to Jackson's Camp. We've made it. Welcome to Jackson's Camp. Remember the riddle I started you off with earlier? I said, how far can you go into the woods? Okay, well, now's a great time to give you the answer if you've not already figured it out. The answer to that old riddle is halfway, because after halfway, you're not walking into the woods anymore, you're walking out of the woods. So here we are in Jackson's Camp in Steele Creek Park. This satisfies that riddle perfectly, because this is the most remote point in Steele Creek Park. If you go in any direction, you're not walking further into the park, you are now walking out of the park in some direction. So as we mentioned before, this is where Joe Jackson, the first naturalist hired to work in Steele Creek Park, actually made his camp in this space. And we'll show you in a moment how this is an area that's a valley created by the terminus of several different ridge lines and creeks coming through, which form this several acre sized flat area, this valley in the middle of the park. The other thing I'm going to show you in just a moment that makes this area so special is the creek that flows through here and some of the seasonal drainages that feed into that creek as well. So it's been an arduous journey of several rocky and sweaty miles, but I'm so happy to show you a little bit about this space. Well, multiple ridge lines feeding into this valley that we call Jackson's Camp also means multiple ravines and steep-sided valleys that are all feeding into this location. And what that means is that Jackson's Camp is a great place to encounter Slagle Creek. That is one of the only permanent bodies of water in Steele Creek Park, with the exception of Steele Creek and Mill Creek that feed into the lake way over on the north side. So we're here in the late summertime. Slagle Creek has dwindled to just a trickle with a handful of little bathtub-sized holes here and there, but it won't dry up completely, but it does make for one of the most biodiverse aquatic environments in the park. So let's turn over some rocks and see who we can find. Oh, well, here's a wonderful find. This is one of the reasons we came here to start looking in this creek. This is a teeny tiny little salamander. As I've told you before on this show, you hopefully know by now that you live in the salamander capital in the world. If you are in Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, or Western North Carolina, that's our region. We have more species of salamander here than anywhere else in the whole world. So finding salamanders in a creek is always a good sign. They're indicators of good water quality. This little fella, whew, goodness, it's hard to say what it is. I'm pretty sure it's a desmognathine salamander, but it's young and it's larval, and the species are pretty tricky to identify. So great find. Well, here's another common sight to many of our creeks and waterways in this region, a crayfish. This is a fun little one. I'm not sure what the species is. There are several that occur here. I don't think it's a rusty crayfish. That's the most common species that we find in Steele Creek Park, but I don't think that's what this is. Of course, crayfish, I'm certain noticed that they look like little lobsters, and that's basically what they are. They are freshwater crustaceans, and they are related to lobsters. So what a great find. Oh, wow, look at this monster baby right here. Oh, I'm very excited to find this. This right here is a larval salamander. So this is, remember salamanders are like frogs and toads. They have, the name amphibian means double life. And so most frogs and toads and salamanders will start off their life in the water, and they breathe through gills. And so you can see that on this one right here. You see these red feathery gills on the sides of the neck. But then most amphibians will undergo metamorphosis, and they might live on land or continue to live in the water as adults. So this right here is a larval salamander, but this is an awfully big larva. That gives us a hint on what species it is. I don't know which species it is, but a larva this big is almost certainly a plethodontid salamander. So these are the lungless salamanders. When they metamorph and turn into adults, these weird little guys and gals have neither lungs nor gills. They breathe directly through their skin. But right now he's a baby and he's breathing through the gills on the side of its neck. And so this is likely a spring salamander or a red salamander or some other plethodontid. Great find. In addition to the crayfish and the salamanders, which I can catch, there is a whole host of life living in this creek that I can't catch. Minnows abound. It's hard to believe, but even in this shallow trickle of a creek, there are fish that make their home here. It looks like most of what I'm seeing are creek chubs. They can survive low oxygen environments, as this creek will almost dry completely up, but especially, I've introduced it to you before on this show in the past, the Tennessee dace, a rare minnow that calls Steele Creek Park home, lives in habitats exactly like this. Well, we're on our way out of Jackson's Camp, and here's another amazing discovery. This right here looks like it's probably a shining club moss. The club mosses are truly incredible. They are an ancient group of plants that we find their fossils right here in this area from times before the dinosaurs. These are vascular plants, so you can see it's standing up tall off the ground. It has vascular tissue. But it does not have seeds, fruits, or flowers. It is a seedless vascular plant. And this is an unusual species. I don't see it many places, but right here in Jackson's Camp, you can find it. Whew. That was a hike. Thanks for going with me to Jackson's Camp, and I invite you to explore it for yourself. But do remember, Jackson's Camp, as it is a valley in the woods where multiple trails intersect, it is one of the places where we get a lot of people turned around and lost. So definitely take a hard copy of the trail map with you. They're available in the Nature Center for free. And also be prepared for a lengthy hike. The trip to and back from Jackson's Camp is at least a 6 to 8 mile hike, depending on how you go and how you get back. So it is an adventure for anyone, to be sure. But whether it's an 8-miler into Jackson's Camp or just a stroll around the Lakeside Trail, be sure to come out to Steele Creek Park, because here's where you can be the explorer.